And he did that, and of course it caught on and spread. And within the family, we were all brought up to play Scrabble. My sisters and I, and my mother was forced into it as well, so we all became Scrabble players.
Do you still play Scrabble?
Mainly with my mom and sis. When my sisters don't live in India, but when they come visiting to sort of share my mother's company, then I join them when I can and play.
That is fantastic.
So otherwise, there's no real time. But it's a lot of fun. And the other thing that Dad did was he invented a forerunner of the game that many of you know as Wordle today. In that he used to imagine a 5-letter word in his head and make us guess the word. Of course, there was no computer and no yellow and green squares and all of that. So what we got 20 turns and not just 6. But he wouldn't tell us which letters were right. So if he imagined a word, we'd have to go through a long process of guessing other 5-letter words to figure out which letters were. They don't have the kind of words that exist in languages like Russian or Portuguese for emotional feelings. So that sort of thing, I've got an essay on that. But with 101 essays, I'll spend the whole evening telling you what they are. There just is a lot. Okay?
Wonderful. How about we ask a couple of questions from the audiences as well?
Sure.
Because I'm sure they're really, oh wow, okay.
Okay, you pick the question answer.
Oh my goodness.
Don't make me unpopular by choosing. Some gender balance is also required.
Yeah, let's do that. We'll do some, okay. Mic आपके हाथ में है ना? Pass on to the gentleman with the purple shirt, I suppose. Yes.
Hi.
Hello sir, good evening. We met in Pune 2 weeks back.
Oh gosh, okay.
Yes, and you had formed 4 words on the spot on that day while you were there at the event. Today, in terms of the large gathering, would you like to try that? And
oh my gosh.
So you are known for forming new words and adding new words to the dictionary. So
you know what? She challenged me, and I came up with some. I wasn't prepared for them. I'll tell you one of them because I'm rather proud of that one, and that's we always talk about somebody being a lifelong friend, a kindred soul, whatever, all of these things. But there isn't one word for somebody who is a kind of soulmate. I mean, soulmate is a word, but normally soulmate is used for romantic relationships. But you could have platonic friendships as well. Genuine friendships where you feel a soul-like connection. Many of us have that with people we went to school with, and so on. So I thought, since English is derived from multiple root languages, like they have words beginning with Latin roots, they have words with Greek roots, they even stolen words from India. Like as I said in my book about British colonialism, the British took the word loot into their dictionaries as well as their habits. It's our word, but they took it. So I came up with a word for a soulmate who's a friend by combining the Sanskrit word for soul, Atma, and the French word for friend, which is Ami. And you have Atmami or Atmami. That might be a word you can come up with and use. I'll try and make it more popular so others also use it. No point my being the only one who uses it.
Wonderful. Could we
tell somebody you're my Atmami and then I win a point.
Atmami. That's such a beautiful word though.
Thank you.
Okay, can you pass on the mic to the lady back here?
Hi, my name is Shubham.
Hi.
If you were to start over your entire oratory lessons at the age of 34 and become as good as you are, what are the top 3 tips for all of us?
Oh my gosh. No, I didn't. I started actually quite late. I reinvented my life at the age of 51 when I came into politics after a completely different career at the United Nations. Not 34. But if you want to start off at 34, you're probably better off because you still have time to build a career in a new place. At 51, you're kind of long in the tooth, and there are lots of young whippersnappers who still resent you because you're honing in on their patch. But at 34, you're still young enough. I don't think you need to worry about that. I would urge you to, above all, follow your bliss. Ask what you would look forward to doing each day and try and make a career out of that, rather than looking at what jobs are available and trying to learn to like them, which is kind of tough. Especially in today's environment where there's so much of unemployment, so few jobs. Decide what you look forward to doing every day and see if you can make a career. Nowadays, you can invent careers thanks to social media, YouTube, and all sorts of things. Find a way of doing that. You might well find yourself succeeding at something you never imagined you would. Good luck.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Thank you. Just to follow up, the question was more to do with my communication skills than career. So I wanted like tips on how do we become better communicators and articulate ourselves better.
Well, I think the only way to communicate is to do it, is to actually talk to people and see if you're making an impact, see if people value what you have to say. I often say to people, I really value the fact that in school in Mumbai, when I was a kid, there were elocution competitions, debate competitions. We had a chance to speak and to see whether we could speak well, with clarity. And I remember when I left Mumbai, I was too young to be in the official school debating team, which was only for high schoolers. But there was a kind of a bunch of precocious youngsters who were unleashed on audiences to be interjectors. That is, that you could ask questions to the debaters. And I was a star interjector for Campion School. So I would go and ask difficult questions to the cathedral school debaters and so on. That kind of thing. But the main thing is you just speak. You have to overcome, first of all, a certain amount of stage fright, which everyone has the first time they go before the public. And you can only overcome that by doing it. You do it often enough, you don't get nervous, right? You also have to feel that you know that some things you've said had an impact. And you also have to learn why some things you said didn't have an impact. And that means you've got to try yourself out in front of people, in front of an audience. The initial audience may just be your extended family or your school friends or whatever. But then you have to go and try and reach out to strangers. So the best thing to do is do it, and that's how you become a better communicator. I don't think there's any formula. You just have to keep practicing. Practice makes perfect, as the cliche goes.
I'd like to compliment you on the importance of punctuation. I just read an excerpt. Would you like to say something about that? I just read a sentence which left me in splits of laughter. It says, let's eat grandma. How do you punctuate that? And it really had me laughing. Yes.
So there's a few of those laughter-inducing ones there, but exactly, the mispunctuated announcements for various things, particularly on social media, often give you unwitting hilarity. And so, for example, there was somebody who wanted to say, let's eat grandma in a text message and didn't put a comma after eat. And you can imagine what that means, right? Somebody actually was having a cookout in their building where there were other people invited, and he wanted to say, those who'd like to eat, my wife is going to be cooking at 6 o'clock or whatever. He didn't have the comma. So those who would like to eat my wife, she is cooking at 6 o'clock. You can imagine it's not particularly funny for the wife, but it certainly was for those who got the announcement. And so on and so forth. I mean, there's the very embarrassing case of somebody who started a restaurant called Anu's Kitchen, and they left out the apostrophe. You can imagine what that did for her sales of her food items. But anyway, and so on and so forth. But anyway, they're not always printable, but they're there in the book.
I mean, just the way you speak about it, it's so hilarious. I can only imagine how funny the book would be, to be fair. All right, there's this lady back there. Can we just pass on the mic across to her, please?
Thank you so much, sir.
You also spoke about, doing it as much as you can and getting rid of the fear of stage speaking. Sorry, do you want to ask him a question? Yeah. Oh, okay, perfect. We'll pass on later behind, don't worry.
Sure. Hello, sir. This is a privilege to have you. It's a privilege to see you, in fact.
Thank you.
So, one question. So, what is the advantage of writing a simple language, simple English, understandable by mass, and what is one advantage of writing a complex English book?
It depends, I think, on who you're trying to reach and what you're trying to convey. I mean, she mentioned Sudha Murthy, Chetan Bhagat. These are all people who sell books in the millions. I don't. But then I don't write like them, so I don't expect that everyone will want to read what I write. What I write about, I feel that I use words that are the most appropriate for the ideas or situations I'm trying to convey. And those words, if well chosen, may not be the simplest ones. And therefore, I make no apologies. Yes, sometimes I may be driving you to a dictionary, but my answer is it's worth it. And sometimes I hope that you just read enough of me and get a sense of what I'm saying without having to pause and go to a dictionary. But with simple writing, more people understand you. I've often said that certainly for oral communication, you have to speak in language that people understand. I'm talking to a wide variety of people here, different backgrounds, different educations, different levels of proficiency. It makes no sense for me to use highfalutin words. So my instinctive communication consists of things like this, like what I'm saying right now. When I write, and I write about complex things, I write a book on the Constitution, or I write a book on Indian nationalism and patriotism, or I want to be very precise in what I'm saying. I don't want to use words that may both be simple and very simply misunderstood. So I would rather be very precise and stand by what I'm saying. It often leads to problems. The main difference is oral communication, written communication. Oral communication, you need to be simpler. Once in a while, for a joke, you can be complicated. I mean, you may remember some time ago there was this, my publishers asked me to announce the imminent publication of my then new book, which is now many years ago, called The Paradoxical Prime Minister. So I, just as a joke, because I was getting this reputation for big words and so on, I said that this book is not just a 400-page exercise in floxy nosi nihilipilification. Now, I also gave the meaning of the word, which merely meant the act of estimating something or someone as worthless. I want to tell people, if they think that because I'm an opposition MP writing a book on the Prime Minister, I'm just going to attack him as worthless. No, it's much more complicated, complex, nuanced analysis of his life and record and so on. So I said it for that reason, but I also gave the meaning. That had the unwitting consequence of parents wheeling out their toddlers for months on end whenever they saw me anywhere. Tell uncle, floxy nosi, and these poor children would have to say floxy nosi, nihilipurification to get a sabash from me. So that, I must admit, was not perhaps the smartest thing I could do. But having said that, I seem to have introduced that word into India's vocabulary. Everyone knows it now.
Thank you so much. And I have one follow-up question to that. Since you mentioned about parents, in today's world, like, parents do know what is the importance of reading and writing. Come what may, it could be digital or like physical, but they are introducing them some form of this. So now also over English to other languages, like many people think only English could be that. Of course, it is a beautiful language and across the territories you can reach. But there are many languages are dying because parents want them to be English readers and stuff like that. Any word for those parents?
No, that shouldn't be happening. First of all, I'm not sure you're right about the reading habits of children, because what I'm hearing more and more is that children are only reading books for school, in school and for school. Sure. Coursework and homework. They're not reading for pleasure.
Yeah.
And that deprives them of a whole set of experiences, but even more so, when you talk about digital reading, most of the digital reading they're doing is WhatsApp messages and social media posts, which are short, superficial, often ungrammatical, and do not train the mind in the joys and complexities of more serious reading. I've got an essay on that in the book, because for me it's extremely important that parents get their children to read the printed word. In fact, I remember a friend of mine telling me her son was only interested in football. I said, get him a book on football then. But he shouldn't only see football as something he sees on a screen or plays with his friends in the park. He's got to read. If it's a question of you feel he won't be interested if you give him a novel or a short story or whatever, give him a book about football with pictures, but let him read. Because the whole point is, first of all, he realizes that books can give him pleasure, which is something he didn't know. Secondly, through the process of reading, his mind is expanded, his vocabulary is expanded, his ability to explain and understand things is expanded. It's crazy to deprive children of that by not letting them realize that this is a source of pleasure. You can go somewhere where you don't have an internet connection, you don't even necessarily have a battery, but you can read a book. So for God's sake, let children realize that when they're young. Not enough of that is happening in my honest view.
So just one part of
But we've got so many other hands up now.
one part of it, like, what about the other languages where also parents should encourage them to read? Just one word from you. So, like,
On other languages, I'll just say that in our country, we're a land of multiple languages, and it's very important, it seems to me, that we should give everyone an opportunity to to develop and speak their own language, and that's extremely important. To my mind, one of the things that most pedagogists, educationists, teachers have found is that children learn better in their mother tongue, especially initially. And another language can come later. But unfortunately, even for poor people in India, there is a perception that mastery of English is essential because it's a language of opportunity. And that's where they push their kids into it. But we don't have enough good teachers, and particularly in our government schools and in village schools, there are an awful lot of children learning bad English from unqualified teachers, and that's not a blessing for them either, because they're losing those skills and proficiencies in their mother tongue, and they're just learning bad English. I would encourage them, certainly, to read books in their mother tongue as well. Now, those who are secure in their command of their mother tongue are reading. I know, for example, in Kerala and in Bengal, Malayalam literature, Bengali literature is flourishing. Books are being published far more than English language books in those two states. But in other cases, is that happening? Hindi is now coming into its own. Good Hindi publishing is happening. And one of the things that Hindi publishing is doing is publishing translations into Hindi of English books as well. So that too is getting an audience and getting attention. But yes, I think you are right to point to the fact that we need to give that a positive push and give it encouragement. I agree with you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. I think we'll do one last question, and that's about it, because there's so many people. We'll be sitting here for hours otherwise. Yeah, ma'am, please go for it.
Yeah, good evening. Taking her question up, why do you think the book clubs in India, especially for children, are struggling? We do not see so many book clubs around.
I think, frankly, the thing about book clubs is it depends very much on the organizers and whom they include in a book club. There are, I'm afraid, sort of very, what can I say, shishi book clubs, that is, society ladies getting together once a month to read. I don't mean to be critical, because some of them are reading my books and I'm very grateful, so don't get me wrong. But I'm just saying that when you ask about children, that becomes a different thing, because catering to children, especially given that children have so many other distractions, is a challenge, and people are not making the effort to face that challenge. I would like to encourage many booksellers to try and form book clubs, and get children to come, not necessarily sit there, not necessarily offer them a Coke or a milkshake as well to sweeten the pill, but make sure that they actually buy books and discuss them on the premises of the bookstore, that kind of thing. But why is it not happening is A, it's a lot of effort, and B, as you know, buying books is a decision made by the parents and not by the kids. And therefore the target from a commercial point of view is always the parents. And therefore book club for children requires you to organize children, corral them together, make them have a reason to sit down together and discuss books, and then they have to be excited enough about it to persuade their parents to buy the books, and that becomes a whole complicated thing.
So
if you have an experience of it, tell us.
Yes, we have been struggling for the last 7 years.
Yeah, so we run a book club for children.
Okay.
It's an online thing.
Online?
Yes. So children from all over India, they log in.
What ages?
6 to 14.
Okay.
Yes, and we discuss books, we talk about books, we talk about things connected to books. So we try to inculcate the idea of critical reading and critical thinking. But the challenge that we face is that most of the time, children come up and say that, we're not interested in reading. So we feel that it has to come from the parents. The parents have to inculcate these habits.
That's the problem.
Yes.
That's very much the problem. I think the parents, first of all, also need to set an example themselves.
Yes.
If children see their parents reading, then I can assure you they will also want to emulate. Children are very, very observant. They imitate behaviors they see around them.
Yeah.
If the parents are never reading, then why would the children feel that it's an appropriate thing for them to do? It would be a great pity. We can take another question. This young man has been raising his hand.
Okay, perfect. Okay. Yes, please go for it.
The mic is in your
Listen,
hand.
we'll let you pick people in the audience, okay?
So I wanted to talk to you about at Sort always there are two reasons for reading.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So I believe there are many reasons for reading, but two of the most prominent ones may be escapism and when one likes to be challenged, right,
Okay.
intellectually. So I've explored both facets of that.
Right.
So it's just that what do you think about contrarian authors or authors that practice dissent through books?
I have no problem with that. I, in fact, have always believed one should read things one agrees with and one should read things one disagrees with. Because the whole idea is that reading should stimulate thought, should stimulate the reader to think. And very often books don't do that. They provide a fat formula and
Too much pandering.
there's a lot of pandering. So if you read someone who you really disagree with, you have to at least go through the process of interacting with the words on the page and understanding for yourself why you disagree. So of course you need to read a contrarian author.
Actually, I was thinking about how writings evolved because in your belief, because she just talked about how some books are taught in school, like Shakespeare. Shakespeare in his time was considered lascivious, lurid, or indulgent of the worst of human instinct. But now he's taught in schools and universities.
Yeah, though as recently as when I went to school, it was censored Shakespeare, I was taught.
Oh, God.
There were editions edited by a man called Baudelaire, which lent his name to the expression Baudelaireization, where he took out all the risque references, all the naughty lines of Shakespeare were taken out. And that's what we learned in school, in Indian schools, for the ISC exam, the senior Cambridge examinations. I don't know if that's any different today. I wouldn't be surprised if they're still teaching the censored editions of Shakespeare. But anyway.
Should we pass on? Sorry.
Yeah, sure, pass it on for a couple more people, I don't mind.
Okay, go for it. Let's keep it short and sweet so more people can actually ask questions from that sense.
Hello sir, good evening. So my question is, who are your favorite writers whose writing you enjoy and who inspires you?
I'm very, very eclectic. I like a lot of very different kinds of writing. So as a child, my favorite was P.G. Wodehouse because everything he wrote gave me such pleasure, made me laugh, made me smile, and made me appreciate how you could use language to witty effect, to humorous effect. And so I would still continue to recommend P.G. Wodehouse to everybody. But I'm sorry to say I never succeeded in communicating that love to my kids. So each one has their own taste, right? I also enjoyed very different writings of someone like Gabriel Garcia Marquez or Mario Vargas Llosa, these Latin American magical realist writers who had a very different style of describing the world. I also like the very, very different style of the East European writers like Milan Kundera, who wrote short, crisp, dry prose, but which evoked a lot of feeling novels in India. I was very struck by the fact there were such limited kinds of writing that qualified as Indian writing in English. I said, why shouldn't we also have mysteries and thrillers and chick lit and mythological novels and all that stuff? And now we do, and I'm very happy with it. I may not read, the rom-coms and the chick lits and so on, but I'm glad they exist because you must have that whole range of choices so every kind of reader is satisfied and has something to appeal to them.
Dr. Tharoor,
Where is that?
for me to use this word is clearly an exercise in flexing, helification. I hope you give me a shabash for that.
Shabash? But you're not 4 years old, so.
Yeah, my question is two-part and it's cliche. One is about your writing process, right? How long does it take you to write a book, right from idea formation to completion? Second is, with the advent of ChatGPT, do you feel threatened that your literary merit is sort of lessened? And do you use it yourself?
No.
Thank you.
All right, so all three things I'll answer. Number one, I write pretty fast, but it depends on what I'm writing. Some books have taken longer than others, but I write pretty fast. There's an American humorist of the 1940s called A.J. Liebling, who said the line that I wish I had said, but I'm happy to quote him. He said, I write faster than anybody who writes better, and I write better than anybody who writes faster. So I write pretty fast. The question of ChatGPT, I'm not at all threatened because when ChatGPT first became popular, and by the way, I'm horrified to discover that Indians use ChatGPT more than any country in the world. Okay, so 62% of ChatGPT users in the world are Indians. It's a frightening thing. So everyone is using it. But when it first came on, lots of people on social media were sending me things like, write a letter to your boss demanding leave in the style of Shashi Tharoor. Or, write a romantic letter in the style write a Diwali greeting. And I must say that all of them sounded nothing like me. I certainly couldn't recognize anything of myself, even though there's so much I've written that's available on the internet that ChatGPT could have cannibalized. It couldn't do me. And that's ultimately, I think, the difference is that human spark isn't there. So where do I use ChatGPT? I use it very rarely, but I use it only for research because it's much faster. Whereas in the old days, I'm not even that old, the recent days, I would have to go and ask sort of 10 different searches on Google to find out something. I can go to ChatGPT with a very precise question and it'll dig out the answer for me very rapidly, as rapidly as I would have got each of those 10 different answers from Google that I would then have to distill and understand an issue. So that can be helpful when I'm against a deadline, because I write columns and I have a column to finish on deadline. I could use it. But I don't use it that often because it only applies when I'm looking up data points that are not in my head. If you're writing an opinion piece, you already know why you have an opinion. You can usually write it. You can just verify a specific spelling of a name or a title of somebody or whatever. But sometimes when you need more than that, then certainly either an internet search or a ChatGPT search can actually help you get the stuff very quickly, and that's the main reason I use it. Otherwise, I would certainly never ask you to write something in my style and pass it off as my own, because I don't think it could do it.
Absolutely. You'd have to pick up the next one because there's so many hands back here.
Well, there's a young lady in pink there, and there's somebody who has a mic here, so. Okay.
Hi, sir. Good evening.
The young lady in pink deserves another mic. Yeah, after you.
Thank you for doing that. Sir, I have two questions for you. My name is Siddharth, and I'm a debut author as well.
Congratulations.
Thank you, sir. I published my first book. So my question is that, is English poetry dying? If so, if you say yes, then is it because of the readers or lack of proper writers? Second, is Mr. Shashi Tharoor going to write poetry in India?
Well, actually, the truth is that publishers don't consider poetry viable. In other words, people write poetry, not enough people read it, and even less are prepared to pay to have it. So, unless you get a very big name like a Vikram Seth or somebody, you don't make money publishing poetry, and therefore publishers are very reluctant to do so. And often you have very small presses working on a shoestring without a major distribution network of publishing poetry. It's hard because poetry is actually a very tough and demanding art. And I think those who write good poetry, and there are a few in our country, are doing something perhaps far more difficult than writing prose, especially non-fiction prose, because we're all talking non-fiction, fiction prose all the time, right? I mean, everyone is doing it, whereas you're not talking poetry all the time. You really have to think. Partly, I think, in a country like India, the poetic culture that usually exists in Indian languages. So there's a tremendous fondness for Urdu Shairi, for verses in ghazal form, and certainly in many Indian languages, people not only publish poetry, but it's read and recited, and people learn it by heart and quote poetry and so on. We haven't had that kind of thing. I mean, if at all we can quote poetry, it's because we studied English honors or we read poets from the international canon whose verses we remember. How many Indian poets can anyone in this audience quote a line of? Anyone? 2 or 3? I'm glad. Okay, that's still better, but 2 or 3 is about 3% of the audience. And that's essentially why a publisher says, I can't afford to publish poetry. So that's the challenge that I think answers your question. So it's not dying. The art form will never die, because as long as people want to express themselves in poems, in images, in lyrical verse, and whatever it may be, different forms of poetry, they will do so, because in fact, many poets write for themselves. I know many poets who just write and shove it into a drawer, don't even try and publish it, it's too much of a hassle. And they do it on the side from other jobs. But if you actually write very good verse, I think you need to publish it to show the readers what's available. And there are enough good poets still working in our country despite everything, that we should encourage that. So if your work is a book of poetry, good luck with it and congratulations. I hope that you will actually find a readership that will encourage your publisher to publish another one.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right, can we pass on the mic to the lady in the...
I'm just trying to organize
pink
some
jumper.
gender balance because so many guys got a chance to ask questions. So let's get a lady in, then I'll come back to one more and then we'll wrap up. Because I've been warned that there's going to be a book signing afterwards, which may take some time. So.
It was going to be quite long for that one as well. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Hello sir, good evening, my name is Murthy.
Hi.
And it's a very privilege and honor to speak to you.
Thank you.
Actually, I had attended the IIMU and Vadodara conclave. And there was a rapid fire and wherein you had answered with some Gen Z slangs. So do you think that these Gen Z slangs will ever be included in Tharoor?
No. Look, actually every generation has its own slang. And it always mystifies the previous generation. So when my generation would say things like hip and cool and jazzy and so on, the previous generation, what does that mean? But today it seems terribly old-fashioned and dated. No one says groovy anymore. No one says hip. No one says jazzy. These are all things we said in those days and we thought we were being very trendy. So similarly, what today's Gen Z is saying, whether it's saying riz or snack or all of these words, which honestly I'm not sure need to exist, but it means something to them, so let them say it to each other. I'm not sure that by the time they become adults, their kids are going to take them seriously. They can say, what a silly thing to say. Why do you call a good-looking person a snack? Is a sabudana vada good-looking? What is a snack? But anyway, Gen Z does it, right? So, I mean, that's it. All right, now you pick one last name because I will make 10 enemies if I pick one of them. So you pick one and then we'll...
Do you know it's GT and BT? Even I just learned that very recently.
No, you tell me.
It's good trip and bad trip.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
But does that mean a trip in terms of travel? Does it mean
travel. So if you're having a good travel, you say GT, which is a good trip, and a bad trip.
Well, this is a GT thanks to all of you.
Wonderful. All right, let's pass it on to this gentleman with the green kaftan.
Hello, sir. It's so nice to meet you.
It's a kurta, not a kaftan.
Yeah.
Sorry, kurta.
So first of all, I want to say you something. Your word that soulmate, Atma Ami is a French word. You said mate. Ami is a Bengali word also, sir. It means me.
Me, exactly. Yeah. But that's why you have to know the origin of the word.
Yeah. Sir, now my main question to you is, what is the feature of short story?
In Bengali, you wouldn't say Atma me, you would say Amar Atma.
Amar Atta. No Atma, sir. Atta.
Acha, okay.
Amar Atta. So actually, the literature which is there, last century, you see, Sharat Chandra, Rabindranath, everyone, I mean, the literary boom came from Bengal. All by eminent Bengali authors and all. Sir, my question to you is, now the future of short stories in India or in across the world. You see, we grew up on Maupassant, Chekhov, O. Henry, Tagore's short stories. But now no one writes short stories and neither they are published because also previously there were some journals, monthly journals.
There's your answer.
But now
all the magazines that published short stories are extinct. There was an entire subculture of short story writing because magazines wanted short stories. And what happened was, for example, the Saturday Evening Post in America was the most prestigious thing. Half the magazine consisted only of short stories by the most famous writers in the world, and writers wrote for them. But then, with the advent of television, magazines started dying. They stopped getting readers, they stopped getting advertising, they closed. Even in India now, can you name a short story magazine? When I was young, Caravan used to publish short stories. It no longer does. And now it's a magazine for politics and fiction. It doesn't publish short stories anymore. Illustrated Weekly of India existed. It used to carry short stories. It was very prestigious to be published in the Illustrated Weekly of India. Magazine doesn't exist as a writer. And unless you come from a very well-off family, you need to make a living. Somebody has to pay you for it. Where do you go if you write a short story? Either you write 15 short stories and get a publisher to publish a collection. But most publishers will tell you, okay, you write well, but go write a novel first. If your novel succeeds, then I'll publish your short stories. That's the reality. So I've learned all this from actually dealing with publishers. Actually, I had published a fair amount of short stories in the pre-television age in India because I wrote from my childhood and I had short stories published in all the Indian magazines. But my collection of short stories was published as my third book after the success of my two novels. That's when the publisher said, now it's okay, I think we'll publish your collection of short stories. There is a readership. People will buy the short stories only because it's Shashi Tharoor's and not because they will buy short stories, because no one's buying short stories. That's the publisher's attitudes. If you want to be very blunt about it, literature is indeed a commercial activity. Publishers have to spend money publishing, they have to pay the writer, they have to pay the bookseller for stocking the book and selling it, and they want to make their money back and ideally make a profit. And for that, they have decided, or they have argued, that poets sell, as well as novels, self-help books, and controversial political books. And those are the things that they want you to write. What can I say? And textbooks and reference books, but that's another story.
So one last question. Which is better, self-publishing or going through the normal route? Because it takes time.
90% of self-published books are vanity exercise. They're not good enough to be bought and read, and they lose money. Let's be very honest. Because self-published books don't get reviewed, don't get attention, don't get prominent displays in bookshops. If you're lucky, and you might be lucky, then yes, the occasional self-published book just takes off. For example, the most famous recent example is a book called 50 Shades of Grey, which was initially self-published, acquired a huge online publicity and notoriety. It was a very sexually explicit book. And then it got published by a mainstream publisher. And in India, there is a story of Amish Tripathi.
It's the Meluhas of, the Nagas, the Amish's first novel.
Amish's first novel, The Immortals of Meluha, was first published, but he personally went to bookshops and made them store it. And then they sold by word of mouth, and then a publisher came to him and said, we're willing to publish it nationally. And that's how I launched his book, in fact, was because it got a national publication. He approached me to give it that extra boost that a self-published book wouldn't have. Now, to my mind, this is great. But how many such stories are there? Between 50 Shades of Grey and The Immortals of Meluha, you have two stories. I literally can't think of any comparable story in the last 20 years of a huge success from self-publication. So if you do it because you've submitted your book to publishers, no publisher has accepted it, and you therefore want to see your book in print because you put a lot of work into it, do it, but be prepared to spend the money and never earn it back. Just buy enough copies to send to your friends or to encourage them to read, to give it to them if they won't buy it. That's about the best you can do with self-published books. So ideally, write to meet the standards that publishers set, then you'll have the satisfaction that you're published without spending money for it. Thank you all very much. I'm really sorry, but I have to sign books and leave. So many thanks for it.
What do we do about this gentleman back who's got his hand up the entire while, the entire time? Should we just take one last question?
Okay, sure.
Just one last. Okay.
Hello, sir. I am Farooq, extremely privileged to be here. Sir, I am from the IIMUN Mumbai local team. Okay. And yes, sir, Rishabh sir always tells and advises us that we should not go with the author's words and its vocab, but we should look into the substance. So, but when the youth, as IIMUN is a youth-run organization, so the people between 16 to 22 years and even prior 15 to 17 some years, if we read books, we even get through them and we get in the flow with the author's writing and we cannot catch the substance. What would be your advice that how could a young person do it and get knowledge from the book and just not read it?
No, it's got to be both. I mean, I agree entirely that words are a means of communication. They're a vehicle. They're not the destination. The destination is the idea contained in those words. It's what the words are meant to convey to you that you're supposed to glean from the book. Now, even here, it's a book about words, but the stories it tells you about words and word origins and word usage is what you're supposed to benefit from. So you won't make the mistakes I've talked about, and you'll know. So in other words, even in a book about words, there is learning. It's never just the words themselves. Now, yes, words can be important when it comes to questions of style. I learned from Woodhouse the joy of style, because he used language so cleverly that you sat back and admired and laughed at the usage of language, and in that process you said, wow. And for me, therefore, when I wrote the novels I wrote, and thereafter I've gone to non-fiction and I need to go back to fiction one day, but when I wrote my novels, I told myself the way you tell the story is as important as the story itself. So there, the vehicle and the destination, the journey and the destination are both important. But if you're reading a book to learn something, then you have to grasp the ideas. If you're not grasping the ideas, why would you continue reading the book? So then get a dictionary or get someone to tell you a little bit about what the book is and read it with that sense in mind. So you know that you're gleaning something from it. Okay? Good luck, young man. Good luck, all of you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Just a last question. Who should get this amazing book, A Wonderland of Words? Who is it for?
It's meant for everybody. Even the cover illustration is both a father and a daughter.
Wonderful.
So it's meant to be both for the adults to enjoy, and many of them will see things they recognize and so on, and for younger readers to learn from. So it's both audiences. And I hope that it's also just for people like me who love words and want to have fun with words.
Yeah, so if you want to have fun with words, then this is definitely the book for you, A Wonderland of Words. With that being said, obviously we're at this wonderful book fest. Bookchore is the ones that have organized it. What are your thoughts on second-hand books?
I don't think there's any problem with second-hand books. Okay, from the author's point of view, the author gets no money out of it. Because second-hand books, so in other words, once you bought the book, and the publisher has got the money and paid the royalty, the author never sees it again. So the book can then be sold and resold multiple times, the author gets no benefit. Therefore, I shouldn't be saying this because I'm disloyal to authors. But it is true that from the reader's point of view, if it's expensive to buy a book and you can't afford it, and you can get the same book secondhand, do it. But don't buy pirated books, because that is just cheating. It's cheating the author, and you can never be sure that the pirate has actually pirated all the right pages of your book. I once was mistaken enough to buy a pirated book, and I found there were 20 pages missing, and they'd been printed up. The same 20 pages have been printed upside down in the book, because these pirates, they don't care. As long as they have an imitation of the cover, they're just very happy to sell anything between those covers to make their money. They don't have to pay a bookseller, they don't have to pay a reader, a writer, nobody. And so don't buy pirated books, but a genuine book that you buy secondhand, go ahead, if that's all you can afford, read it. The more important thing from a writer's point of view, I believe, is to be read, not just to make money.
And I think I was referring more to used books and obviously being more sustainable on the planet that we're living in and reducing and reusing and recycling those books. So if there's someone from a lower background who cannot really afford the actual version of it, there's no harm in using a used book. Absolutely.
I agree.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Environmental consciousness.
Absolutely. That's the way for it, right? Can we please have a big round of applause for Dr. Shashi Tharoor? As a token of our appreciation, we would just like to felicitate you and may request the Phoenix Palladium team. And can I please request the team from Bookchore to also join us here? We have Mr. Shashi Kumar and Mr. Ashlesh Varghese to kindly join us. From the, they worked